So my name is Jen, and I'm here from NAMI Delaware. That's the National Alliance on Mental Illness. And so I'm just going to tell you a little bit about us, and then we're going to talk about mental health in general, things to look out for, and then just some general facts, myths, things of that nature. So you can go ahead and go to the next slide. So we were founded in 1983. It is our 40th anniversary this year. And our mission is to support, educate, and advocate until there is a cure for severe and persistent mental illness. And so I am NAMI Delaware's Peer Services Manager. I focus on peer programming, and I commit to this role as a peer myself. I have lived experience with mental illness, and I'm diagnosed with a few mental health conditions. So this is something I'm very, very passionate about. So when we advocate, we're advocating for individuals and families, so people like you. We're identifying any systemic issues, so within policy, laws, things like that, and then we're working nationally and with state policymakers to iron out any issues in mental health laws and policies. We educate, so we do no-cost presentations and trainings like this, just to, in general, spread awareness and to end that stigma. And then, again, these are just some of the kind of customized presentations that we do for the overall community. So for individuals, businesses, schools, we're really trying to get out there and spread the word. We also have a housing program. It's affordable housing specifically for individuals living with a mental illness. We have housing in all 3 counties, and we operate about 76 different properties. And we have a individual model housing.
How you doing? Hey, baby. You coming for the hug?
So mental health is something that we all have because we are living beings. Mental illness is a real mental health condition that can develop over time, or it's genetic, and it's common and it's treatable. 1 in 5 people in the United States live with a mental health condition, but it's often misunderstood because it's invisible. You can't physically see it. So we're going to get into some effects of COVID and how it's impacted mental health, specifically on older adults. So it has remained a daily stress for many in the U.S., with 63% of adults saying that they're grieving experiences that they never got or that they missed out on, with 2/3 often thinking about what they've missed out on. So it's definitely caused a different kind of grief.
You don't need no paper.
And so during the pandemic, mental health symptoms for people aged 50 to 80, 28% had reported worse anxiety or worries, 19% reported worse sleep, and then 19% had also reported worse depression or sadness. And this can go into, I think it's the next slide. Social isolation was a huge issue in the pandemic. It's already something that was an issue beforehand. It was only exacerbated. And a surprising fact that I found while researching is that the risk of dying from loneliness is equivalent to smoking 15 cigarettes every day. The effects of social isolation really take a toll on a person's physical and mental well-being. And it also, again, increases a person's risk for overall health concerns, like heart disease, obesity, immunity weakness, and then overall mental health conditions. And it's crucial to recognize that loneliness can become a problem for anyone, despite their age. So we're going to focus more now on the older population. So with seniors, the older population, older adults, anyone typically 65 plus. So approximately 20% of anyone age 65 plus will experience mental health challenges, with 1 in 4 adults experiencing issues with their overall mental health. The symptoms of clinical depression can be triggered by other chronic illnesses you may live with, It's common later in life, such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, heart disease, cancer, arthritis. And then people over the age of 85, unfortunately, have the highest rate of suicide, followed closely by those, what was it? Under the age of 84. Was it 75 to 84? Yeah. So I'm going to go into some myths and facts and try to dispel some of the things that often cause stigma around talking about mental health, mental illness. So a myth specifically is that depression and anxiety are normal in this population, when in fact it's not normal with aging, and it can be effectively treated if you are experiencing symptoms of depression, increased sadness. And depression in older adults typically go undiagnosed or misdiagnosed, largely due to the false belief that people in this age, that it's normal to have this health problem. So another myth is that people with dementia don't benefit from mental health care. And this, again, is a myth. And in fact, while it impairs thinking and functioning, this doesn't necessarily mean that people are beyond help or care. And that they can often benefit from mental health care for depression, anxiety, substance abuse, and more. So going into substance abuse or addiction, so the common held belief that there's not a mental health problem that affects older adults regarding addiction or substance use. But actually in the past 20 years, alcohol use has steadily increased among this population, especially among women. So other research does show that approximately 20% of adults aged 60 to 64 and around 11% of 65 plus do report that they're currently binge drinking. And then finally, and this is what I'm here to kind of talk to you about and dispel this myth, is that seniors are thought to be set in their ways and don't respond well to mental health care. That's why I'm here today to talk about this, when in fact, I think you guys are pretty open and willing to have this conversation because it's very important to our overall well-being. So mental health is just as important as physical health, and I argue that there's no difference between mental and physical health. The brain is part of your body. It's a physical, tangible thing. So, as I keep on saying, mental health contributes to overall feelings of well-being, good feelings of well-being, and that untreated mental health disorders in older adults can lead to diminished functioning, substance abuse, a poor quality of life, and that research shows that mental illness can slow the healing of any physical ailments. And I touched on this earlier, that unfortunately mental health challenges, conditions do often go undiagnosed or misdiagnosed in seniors, and often go untreated. So with that said, I want to point out some symptoms for you to be aware of so you can advocate for yourself. So we talked about social isolation earlier, any appetite changes such as overeating, undereating, any confusion or disorientation, if there's any unexplained physical symptoms that you're experiencing such as sweating, shaking, any digestive issues, if there's depressed mood lasting longer than 2 weeks. I would also say that if you notice, if it's not over the course of a continuous 2 weeks, but it's a pattern, it's consistent. There's the loss of interest in activities that you usually love and enjoy. I talked about substance misuse, any sleep changes, either too much or too little, and then any feelings of despair, worthlessness, or guilt that are cropping up. So data is showing that over 60% of older adults do not receive the services they need when developing a mental health challenge or condition, and that a high percentage, the reason why is not purely because of stigma, but also because you don't have the access to health care, specifically mental health care services, such as geriatric psychiatry. There's simply not enough workers, staff to meet the demand. And like I said, the general assumption is that, don't have the same distresses of life as younger adult generations, but it's simply that, you all experience different stresses, and that doesn't negate or invalidate them. So with that said, there's no difference. Older adults can be helped and have the same success as older adults, 65 plus seniors, and that 80% of older adults have recovered from depression after receiving treatment. That included both psychotherapy, antidepressant medication, overall treatment of any mental health challenges or conditions. With that said, 56% of those living with mental illness did not receive mental health treatment in the past year. And this isn't just, senior population, but overall ages. And so you can see that it's not just isolated to this one group. And so I talked about the lack of services that contribute to things going undiagnosed, not being treated. But another thing to be aware of is stigma. Common held beliefs that are unfactual, not true, and often add to prejudice. So the consequences of stigma, specifically against the senior population, include, what does that say? It likely prevents around half from seniors with conditions like depression and anxiety from seeking treatment. And specifically, African American seniors and other older people of color may be more vulnerable to avoiding treatment due to stigma, based on any cultural values, any beliefs held. And then sometimes stigma surrounding mental health are so effective at dissuading individuals from seeking treatment that they don't show signs. They kind of mask what they're feeling. And so one way that we can help kind of dispel the effects of stigma, it's very easy, and it's by being aware of the language that you're using, phrases, any words. Just having the thought in your mind, if you say something and you think, oh, I should try to avoid that. That's you trying, and that's good. That's progress. So when talking about suicide, we avoid saying he, she, they committed suicide, because the word commit has a very negative connotation. It's often associated with crime, sin, this person committed murder, they committed a sin. So instead, we're trying to shift to more neutral language, try to take away the guilt associated with it. So we say things like, he or she died by suicide. If someone's talking about a suicide attempt, not saying that it's failed or successful, but just saying that there was an attempt. Saying that she is a schizophrenic, she is bipolar. A person is not defined by their mental illness. I'm going to trip on this word. A person is not defined by their mental illness. It's not their whole being. It's something that they live with and that they experience. And so rather than saying they are, just saying that she lives with, he lives with, or they experience this mental health condition. Assuming that a person suffers from a mental health condition. So saying, I'm going to use your name, Lauren. Lauren suffers from depression. When in fact, maybe Lauren's been in recovery for many years. I've been in recovery from symptoms related to my bipolar disorder. So I wouldn't want someone assuming that I'm suffering, because I'm not. So just saying that I live with bipolar disorder. And then avoiding the use of terms such as addict, alcoholic, other terms like junkie, crackhead, things of that nature. It's perpetuating that stigma associated with substance misuse. So rather than that, we just, say it's someone with a substance use disorder. And then words such as crazy, lunatic, psycho, there's a lot of other adjectives you can use to describe a person or a situation, ridiculous, outlandish, wild. There's just a lot of other ways we can describe and not perpetuate further stigma. So we're going to get into a little bit about stress. And so we all experience stress, and it's all different kinds of stress. And it's not all bad for us, and in fact, it can be life-saving in some situations, but too much stress can lead to bigger problems if unaddressed. But it's important to remember that while we can't always control the situation we're in, we can control our response to it. So my favorite thing to say is that it's about living through your stress, and rather than trying to navigate and avoid it. Learning how to sit with your feelings, develop healthy coping mechanisms when you do feel yourself, experiencing more stress. So some unhealthy coping mechanisms with stress can include, withdrawal from others. We talked about that social isolation, the use and abuse of substances, overeating, undereating, and then possibly self-harm. So we need to, with that said, extend grace to ourselves in these difficult times. It's not going to be easy, we're not perfect, but just the fact that we're trying to navigate through these stressful times the best we can is what matters, and by trying to develop these more healthy coping mechanisms to do so. So those can look like, for stress specifically, it can be physical, so physical activity, trying to improve the quality of your sleep. It's recommended to get 8 hours, but I know that's not really feasible for everyone. I know some people who function well off of 6, but just being aware of your overall sleep and what your habits look like, so you know when they're changing. Fostering those supportive relationships with others, whether it be your friends, your family, so that you have someone in your corner when you are experiencing any challenges with your mental well-being. Seeking mental health care when you do notice symptoms and they are affecting your daily life, your ability to do things that you usually love to do, things that are just daily, regular tasks. Making sure that you're eating a balanced diet. I love tasty cakes, crumpets. They are my guilty pleasure, but I can't have them with every meal, and I accept that. So I try to have a banana here and there. And then just trying to be mindful. And being mindful, having those mindful activities can look like a variety of things. My way of doing this is by knitting. I love knitting because I find that with every stitch, I'm actively thinking about it. And it's helping take my mind off of anything that may be causing me, any mental distress. And so, with that said, we're going to talk about self-care a little bit. And while this looks like, taking bubble baths, saying nice things about yourself, it's also mental. It's how you treat yourself as well. So asking for help when you need it. Understanding that it's okay to ask for help, that being vulnerable in this aspect is the most courageous thing that you can do. If you need to spend time alone, if that's what you need to recharge, allowing yourself to do that. Not overextending yourself and further extending any burnout or symptoms you may be experiencing. Making sure to put yourself first, because if you aren't your best self, then you can't be your best self for others. Making sure to ask for what you specifically need. While we hope that people are mind readers, they're not. I know I struggled with this for a while, thinking everyone knew exactly what I needed all of the time, and I was often disappointed when they didn't. Making sure that you're setting boundaries, not only for yourself, but with other people, and that when you're setting boundaries, being aware when people cross them, if they cross a line of any sort, and respecting yourself by acknowledging that it's not okay. So one thing I always like to bring up with this is I have a very strained relationship with my parents. I wish it wasn't that way, but boundaries were crossed, and because of that, I've had to limit my contact with them, my conversations, my overall just, connection. Staying at home in the place you live, if you need to, when you need to, again, not overextending yourself. giving yourself the ability to just say no when you need to. No is a full sentence. You don't need an explanation. And if you want to give one, that's fine, but know that someone isn't entitled to that explanation. Fostering forgiveness within yourself for anything that you may be holding on to that maybe you did or said in the past. It's hard. I held on to a lot of grudges within myself about how nasty I was when I would say the nastiest, meanest things I could to a person when I was lashing out when my mental health symptoms went untreated. And I finally come to terms with this is how I acted, but now this is what I did to change those actions. And then knowing when to take a step back, to take a breather, and again, respecting your own boundaries that you've set into place for yourself. So I brought up a lot of symptoms earlier to be aware of in yourself and other people. And so regarding your, your friends, your peers, you might be wondering, what can you do in these situations? So, like I said, be observant. Take note of when you're noticing any of the symptoms that I mentioned earlier, and make the assumption that you're the only person noticing this. Because if you assume that someone else is going to say something, that's not guaranteed. So assume that you're the only one who's noticed. Ask about your concerns using I statements. So if you see someone who is not eating as much or they're overeating, using phrases like I am concerned, I've noticed. Because using the phrase of you've been acting like this, you have been doing X, Y, Z, it comes off very accusatory. And using I statements kind of expresses that empathy. Avoid diminishing their feelings and instead focus, like I said, on empathy, meeting them with empathy and, not making fun of them, teasing them, assuming that they're weak for whatever they're experiencing. Don't promise confidentiality, and I say this specifically in regards to anyone expressing thoughts of harming themselves. If they express any suicidal thoughts, it's a hard and kind of deep subject to talk about, but it's necessary because, like I said, there's a very high rate of suicide in population 75 plus. And then knowing your limits and being able to get help for them from professionals. You have staff here who are wonderful and willing to provide those resources when you need them for yourself and others. And so with that said, I don't want you to hesitate should you ever need assistance from someone, if it be for yourself, for someone else. We can often feel alone in this. I felt very alone when I was first diagnosed with my mental health condition. I hadn't seen anyone talk about it. I talked about the word crazy earlier. I thought I was crazy. I thought everyone was going to think I was a lunatic. But it was after having these kinds of conversations that I realized people were experiencing similar thoughts, feelings, and the same condition as I was. And that helped eliminate the internalized stigma that I held on to for so long. And so with that said, I know that can sometimes be a very heavy conversation, but it's a needed one. And I'm really hoping that some of this information sticks with you, that it resonates in some way. And I just want to thank you for letting me be here, taking up your time. And if you have any questions, if you're seeking any kind of support, we have tons of resources, and I'm happy to talk with anyone. So, yeah, that's about it. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
If you don't feel comfortable asking questions in front of everyone, I'll be here for a little bit, so please feel free to come up if you have anything.
They try to make you comfortable, ready to go to sleep.